today we are going to be talking about how The Little Mermaid, both the Disney version and the original Hans Christian Andersen story, compare to the opera Rusalka. And then after watching this video, you are going to go into Google Classroom and you're going to listen to Part of Your World from Little Mermaid and Song to the Moon from Rusalka and compare them. But let me give you a little bit of a background of the stories so that you know how they're different, how they're the same. So the original story was written by Hans Christian Andersen. He wrote The Little Mermaid and some other fairy tales. He was a Danish author, and he lived in the 1800s, the 19th century. So it's a pretty long story. It's a short story, but it's long compared to what I want to do for this video. So I'll just summarize. Basically, in The Little Mermaid, the original version, they don't have names. They're just kind of unnamed characters. There's the youngest daughter, a mer king, and he is a widower. The Dowager Queen is actually in this story, and she kind of is helping to take care of her granddaughters, which includes the Little Mermaid and all her sisters. When each of them gets to be about 15, they're allowed up to the surface, what it looks like up there, and one of her sisters comes back and tells about what she saw, and then the youngest daughter, which is the Little Mermaid in this case, she eagerly awaits when she turns 15. And so when she turns 15 and she's allowed up to the surface, she falls in love with everything she sees, and she goes up and she sees a prince on a ship celebrating his birthday, and then there's a storm, and she rescues him and brings him back to shore. And he sees her briefly, but he doesn't know she's a mermaid. And then when she sees someone coming out of, there's a kind of a convent, and then the Little Mermaid goes back into the ocean before anyone can actually see her. So she thinks about him, she's fallen in love with him, and she asks her grandmother about the humans and what it's like and how they're different and why they don't interact. And she is told by her grandmother, mer people live 300 years, and then when their time is up, they become foam on the ocean. And the difference is that humans, even their lives are shorter, and they have eternal souls after this. And she wants to have one of those. And the only way she can is if she is able to marry a human. So she sees a sea witch, makes a deal in exchange for her voice of going up and trying to become human. And if he falls in love with her and marries her, she can become human. He doesn't, and he marries someone else, then she will become foam on the sea, and she will never go back with her family. She takes that risk up to the surface, but she has no voice, and she has to try to get the prince to fall in love with her, which isn't easy. And he treats her pretty much like a younger sister, and he still remembers the person who saved him, and she has no way of telling him that this is her, even though he says she looks just like her. He thinks she's one of the girls in the convent and isn't allowed to marry him. So then he gets news that there's a foreign princess she comes and visits, and he thinks she's beautiful, so he goes and he's getting ready to marry her. And so she knows, the Little Mermaid knows, that her time is up and she hasn't been able to convince him to marry her. She becomes foam on the sea, and instead of just, that's it, she then sees these creatures in the sky that are called the Daughters of the Air, and she becomes one of them. And even though the mermaid has no immortal soul, and she wasn't able to acquire one, she can still earn one after 300 years as a Daughter of the Air, and they can take time off of their 300 years if they see a child who is good and loving to their parents. Takes off time. So that is the original story. They've given everybody names. Ariel is the Little Mermaid, and she's got her little friends, Flounder and Scuttle and Sebastian. And then Triton is the Mer King. There is no Dowager Queen, but then there's Ursula the Sea Witch and Prince Eric. And so a lot of the story is the same. She does want to go up, but she's already fallen in love with being human before she finds Eric. And she's been forbidden to go up to the surface instead of it being a rite of passage. Ursula has some kind of personal grudge against King Triton and wants to get back at him by taking his youngest daughter and turning her into one of her little creatures. But the same thing, she goes to the Sea Witch to try to get legs after having fallen in love with Prince Eric. Again, she saw him at his birthday party on a ship and rescued him from drowning. And he sees her and he thinks, of course, that she's someone else when he does finally meet her. And she uses her voice, she exchanges her voice in exchange for being human. And she has 3 days to get him to fall in love with her. And of course, what happens is Ursula then takes her voice and enchants Prince Eric so that he falls in love with her. But in typical Disney style, Ariel and her friends reveal that that foreign princess is actually really Ursula, and there's a big battle, and just like in a lot of Disney movies. And of course, happy ending, Ariel gets her prince. Rusalka, which is an opera written by the Czech composer Dvořák. And it's written in the language Czech. So when you listen to it, you're going to hear it in a different language, but it's not Spanish, it's not Italian, it's not German, it's not French, it's Czech. So it's a language that you don't hear as much. Rusalka means water sprite, water nymph. So they don't have names. There's the prince, there's the foreign princess, there's father, the water sprite, and her name is Rusalka, which is also another word for that. And then there's Jezi Baba, which is the sea witch. So I'm going to read you a very brief summary of Rusalka. It's about 2 paragraphs. So Rusalka, a water nymph, has fallen in love with a human, a prince who comes often to swim in the lake where she lives. So she lives in a lake, not the ocean. There's just one problem. Since she is made of water, he cannot see her. So unlike a regular mermaid, she's made of water and cannot be seen. Rusalka's father, a water sprite, warns her that humans are evil, which is like the Disney version. Ignoring his advice, Rusalka goes to the witch Jezi Baba and begs for a potion that will make her human. Jezi Baba can make such a potion, but the cost is high. In order to become human, Rusalka must give up her voice. No human will ever be able to hear her speak. Rusalka accepts, and Jezi Baba brews a potion. As Rusalka emerges from Jezi Baba's hut, the prince comes to the lake. Seeing Rusalka, he instantly falls in love with her, but she cannot return his words. Despite her silence, the prince brings her back to his palace. A week later, the palace servants have begun to gossip. The prince is growing tired of Rusalka because she never speaks. The prince asks Rusalka why she is so silent, but she cannot respond. He leaves her alone in the garden and goes to dance with another woman, a beautiful foreign princess who has come to catch his eye. Rusalka's father, the water sprite, appears, and she begs him for help, but he can't do anything. The prince reappears, and as Rusalka watches, he declares his love for the foreign princess. Rusalka returns to the lake and begs Jezi Baba to save her. Jezi Baba says that the only way that Rusalka can be saved is if she harms the prince. But Rusalka, she loves him, she refuses. The prince emerges from the forest looking for Rusalka and pleads with her to return. She tells him that if she kisses him, he will die. And he accepts that. So then she kisses him and he falls lifeless into her arms, which is a little bit different. It's the opposite of what happened in the original. So listen to how these 3 stories are. Think of how they're similar. Listen to The Little Mermaid, Part of Your World. When she's singing it, she's kind of looking up at the sun underneath the water from her grotto. And when Rusalka is singing Song to the Moon, she's also singing to the moon, looking up at the sky. So think about those similarities. the differences, even though you're only listening to the songs. You are also welcome to look at a clip of Little Mermaid. I did not include a video, but if you would like to find one, till next time, boys and girls.